Welcome to the G5 Hive and our next installment of our Worker Bee series, where we deep dive into the G5 college football landscape with the folks that know the teams the best. If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you are listening to us in podcast form, please rate and review. Today, we'll be taking a look at the South Florida Bulls, who finished 7-6 last season. They capped off their year with a win in the roofclaim.com Boca Raton Bowl over Syracuse. They wrapped up their 2024 spring practice with their spring game on April 13th. We have a special guest joining us today. He is the radio play-by-play announcer for the University of South Florida football, baseball, men's and women's basketball. He is Jim Louk. Jim can be found at USF Jim Louk on X. Welcome to the show, Jim.
Thanks. I appreciate you asking.
Well, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what led you into sports broadcasting and play-by-play and how long you've been covering South Florida?
Well, what led me into it was not being a good enough athlete to be on the field. Like most people, I was hoping someday I'd be able to play sports for a living, but that wasn't in the cards. So the opportunity to broadcast and still travel around and go to games and go to stadiums and get to be part of that lifestyle was pretty appealing. I've had a very long and happy run at South Florida. I've been there 41 years. Started off doing basketball and then joined the athletic department as an administrator, was an associate athletic director for many years. Retired from that 3 years ago, but was asked to stay on in the broadcasting area. So I find myself doing football, radio, and television for basketball and baseball. And it's been a lot of fun. You guys probably know that kind of stability in this business is kind of rare. So I'm well aware of how fortunate I've been to be at one place for so long.
Let's get to the position where it all starts on offense, and that is the quarterback. There's no doubt in our minds that Byron Brown is quarterback one for this year, but that was not the case last year. Jerry Bohannon was coming off injury. He was the guy that was sent to media days last year, and a lot of people speculated, he came to media days, he must be QB1, but that's not really how things worked out. Can you talk to us about Byram's ascension in this offense last season?
Well, Bohannon got hurt about 2/3 of the year through the 2022 season. Brown came in, played very well at the end of the year, most notably in a game at Tulsa late in the season. Bohannon had a shoulder injury. It was his throwing shoulder and didn't play in spring ball, and we knew that. Everybody expected that. But when fall ball came around, those of us who get to watch the closed door practice, not the media accessible practices, realized very quickly that Gary wasn't doing very much. And it was pretty clear that he was not going to be physically ready to play in the fall of 2023. They did take him to media days. I think that was mainly an indicator of how much they respected Gary. He's a terrific leader. Players and coaches loved him, and I think even under the circumstances, they were glad to have him speak for the program in that kind of situation. You'd probably have to ask the coaches about this, but it might have been a little bit of a sleight of hand, too, in putting him out there when it was pretty evident that he was unlikely to play during the 2023 year. So Brown got the call, young guy, but getting better literally every week, has a great arm, has great instincts, a lot of the same leadership qualities that Bohannon had, and just a great opportunity to make big plays for this team. So he's certainly the number one guy coming into this year.
I think most college football fans know what Byram can do with his legs, but can you tell us more about that arm and how he's progressing as a passer?
He's got terrific arm strength. He can definitely get the ball downfield. I think one of the things he's been working on since last year is accuracy and consistency of accuracy. He was almost like a baseball pitcher sometimes last year, where he'd have an occasional bout of wildness and would miss a guy open downfield. But for the most part, everything is there with him. Arm strength, instinct, and I think it's probably a little bit mechanical sometimes with the accuracy, and knowing the way he works and also the coaching he gets at South Florida, I would expect him to be miles ahead in that this year.
So last season, they got a pretty high profile recruit that a lot of folks were excited for, and Israel Carter. But this offseason, he entered the portal. He ends up coming back to South Florida. What can you share about that situation? What maybe convinced him to come back? And then tell us a little bit about how he has developed as a quarterback.
Well, some guys with the portal will go in and take a look around and wind up coming back. And I think South Florida is pretty happy to have him back. He's a fun guy to watch in warmups. He will sling the ball all over the field in warmups. He really caught our attention doing that a couple of times this year. He did play the bulk of the spring game because they only gave Brown a couple of series, as you would imagine. Got a lot of talent. They found ways to get him on the field last year in a non-quarterback position. They got him the ball in open space a couple of times as a receiver. He had a couple of carries last year. When a guy gets packages designed for him like that, it really tells you two things. Number one, it tells you the coaches really like him and he's doing the right things in practice. But it also tells you that the coaches think he's a potential game breaker. So I think he's got a great future. He's going to be in a battle with Bryce Archie for the 2 spot behind Byron Brown this year. But I think he's a guy that can definitely help in the future. And I would suspect once again this year, they're going to try to find a way to get him on the field in certain packages this season.
They also brought another quarterback who who enrolled early in a true freshman, Marcellus Tate. What can you tell us about him?
Well, enrolled early helps a lot because he was here all spring. He did get a couple of snaps in the spring game. They like him. He's got some talent. He's just in a crowded room now as a true freshman. I think it's probably difficult to figure on scenarios where he gets on the field this year. But again, another guy with a great future, and we all know you can't have too many quarterbacks. You got to have that depth. That's something that South Florida has been lacking in a lot of positions over the past couple of years. So it's nice to see them build some depth in that quarterback room.
Would you say Tate's the athlete that Brown and Israel are, or is he more of a pocket passer, or does he have mobility as well?
He has mobility. I think it's too early to tell to get into comparisons with some of the other guys, but he's definitely an athletic guy. The cameo he got in the spring game was pretty impressive. And, I think we'll see more of him as time goes on. I'm just not sure that 2024 will be the year.
So moving on to the running game, Naquan Wright was our RB1 in 2023 and handled about 55% of all the rushes. Do you expect the same type of production in 2024, or do you believe that Western Kentucky transfer Teron Keith will be able to help shoulder some of that load?
I think it'll be interesting to see if any newcomers break into the rotation because there's a pretty good number of running backs coming back. Wright is probably the top guy. But this coaching staff really likes to break things down by committee. They like to wear opponents down, and they love to bring fresh legs at the running back position in for the first time in the second half of games. I think we'll see a lot of K'Wan Powell, who played quite a bit this year. He did get hurt in the spring game, but coaches like him a lot. And another really intriguing guy, I think, will be Kelly Joyner. This will be Kelly's last year. He's always been a breakout talent, but he has not really been able to stay healthy. And the coaches love to get the ball to him in space, whether it's a handoff or a reception. If he stays healthy, he's going to get a lot of looks this year, but staying healthy, unfortunately, for him has been a challenge.
Moving over back to the passing game, they used a rotation of wide receivers last season. Coffrey Brown heads off to Arkansas. Yusuf Terry is still in the portal, but they do return some production, including second-team all-conference wide receiver Sean Atkins comes back. How big of a deal was it for South Florida to have their first 1,000-yard receiver in program history in Sean Atkins?
It was pretty amazing when you think, almost 30 years of football now at South Florida, and some of the guys that have come through this program at the wide receiver position, nobody had 1,000 yards. So here's Sean Atkins, a former walk-on, 5'0", not terribly fast, and he's the first guy to have 1,000 yards receiving. It's a pretty amazing story. He has great hands. He's absolutely fearless going over the middle. And he's got that work ethic that the coaches hold up to other players to use him as an example, to show how you can get your goals even though you may not be the prototypical athlete that people think of at your position. So he's really done an amazing job. He was the primary punt returner last year as well. Again, not because he's terribly fast, but because he had great hands and he caught the ball every time returning punts. So he'll be a key factor again. I think you'll see some returnees like Michael Brown-Stevens and Naeem Simmons play major roles at wide receiver once again. And they've got some new blood as well, hopefully to help with the depth there.
So you mentioned Simmons and some others. Are there other receivers you think we should know about? And like who, if you had to predict who would join Atkins kind of as the starting wide receivers there in week one, who would that be?
Well, I think that'll get sorted out a lot in fall ball, but I think one guy that's kind of intriguing is Abdur Rahman Yassin. He is a transfer from Purdue. They like him a lot. He's got some size. Some other returnees, Jaquan Smith, never quite put things together last year, but there's a world of ability there as well. So I think that's an interesting area to watch in fall camp because I think there's some playing time to be won there.
Do you think we can expect another 1,000-yard season here for Atkins here in 2024?
I think it depends how much they spread it around a little bit. It's certainly conceivable. He's going to be a main cog in the offense, as we always go back to. He's got to stay healthy, but it's certainly conceivable based on what he did last year.
If you were to describe the tight end usage to someone who's never caught this offense, how would you describe it?
Probably not yet what this coaching staff would like. The Alex Golish offense that he worked with at Tennessee really had some prolific receiving tight ends. Didn't quite have that last year. Weston Wolf is very, very capable. Gunnar Greenwald played a lot. He's an outstanding blocker. They had good pass protection and good blocking from the tight ends. They didn't really have that big receiving tight end that was catching multiple passes every week. So we'll see if they can develop that with some of the young guys or not. But I know that ideally in this offense, they would like the tight end to show up in the receiving stats a little bit more frequently this year.
So moving over to the offensive line, they lose their starting left tackle and Donovan Jennings, but they do bring in some transfers, Jack Wiltie from Colorado and Junior Ubezbu from Vanderbilt. I mean, you got you and I'm assuming Byron Brown both are kind of excited with what they're bringing back for that offensive line. But how did that group look in the spring, and who do you think maybe will get that start at left tackle?
Well, a little bit of work in progress. I think the offensive line all flows from the center position. Mike Lofton will be back for his final year. He's one of the team leaders and really brings that offensive line together. As who's going to be on that left side? That's going to be interesting. You know, R.J. Perry was there for a while last year, had kind of an up and down season. They moved some guys around late in the year. They brought in a true freshman last year, Cole Skinner, who they were willing to redshirt last year, but he was just playing so well and they were so thin on the offensive line, they decided to play him late in the year, and he really made some big contributions late in the season. Offensive line was one of the thinnest positions that Alex Golish had to deal with when he took over this program. They're still building that depth. It's another key area to watch in fall camp, I think, to see how some of the newcomers come in, how some returnees like Zane Herring, who had some injuries last year, Derek Bowman will probably figure a lot in that as well. But can they get some depth so they have significant backups at every position as opposed to shuffling guys around? Some guy goes out for whatever reason on the left side, you're moving somebody from the right side, then you find another guy for the right side. That was kind of the process they've been going through lately, and they hope to avoid this year.
Jim, if you had to pick an offensive player to have a breakout type season in 2024, who would that be?
Well, I would still go with Byron Brown, even though he kind of broke out last year, just because I think the ceiling is so high on him. He can do a lot more than he's shown. He's a terrific runner. I think the coaches would probably be a little more comfortable if he didn't carry the ball quite as much. I think one of the adjustments you'll see him make this year will be in the decision-making process of when to tuck the ball and run and when to hold it and throw. He picks up a lot of yards on the ground, but he took some pretty significant hits last year as well. So I think the coaches will want to protect him a little bit, but I still think there's great chance for even another level or two for Byram this year. The other guy I come back to on offense that I think about a lot is Kelly Joyner, just because I've seen what he can do when he's healthy. And it's just been such a struggle for him with one injury after another the last couple of years. I'd love to see what kind of numbers he could put up, what kind of contributions he could make with a full, healthy year.
Moving over to the defensive side of the ball, last season they ranked dead last in the FBS, allowing an average of 516.6 yards per game in 2023. What does Todd Orlando need to do with this 3-3-5 defense to get things turned around?
Well, he's got to do what he's in the process of doing. He's got to build the roster. Not a lot of depth, especially on defensive line. They didn't get much of a pass rush at all last year. Not a lot of sacks, not a lot of run stoppage for the most part. And that just brought pressure on the rest of the defense. It made it tougher for the linebackers, made it tougher for the secondary, and one problem just kind of flowed to the next problem. The depth was an issue. They just didn't have enough guys they trusted defensively to put on the field. So two things would happen there. Number one, when you have the inevitable injuries, you're looking around to try to adjust and bring in guys and maybe move them to different positions. The other issue they had was that they had guys on the field for more snaps than they would like. And what they're really hoping to is to get a strong second unit defensive line. So they've really got like 10 guys that they feel good about to rotate and keep all those guys fresh, especially late in the game. That's where you'll see progress from that group if they can put that together this year.
Well, let's talk more about this defensive line. The group lost Jonathan Ross to graduation and Trammell Logan and Lloyd Summerall to the portal. How did the group look in the spring?
They've definitely got some talent. They're too going to depend on some newcomers coming in. I think Jason Vaughn, who's healthy again, will be a key contributor there. There's an interesting guy too that I'm anxious to see, Bernard Gooden. He's a transfer from Wake Forest, was with the team all last year. They thought he was going to play last year. The eligibility didn't come through from the NCAA, so he didn't play last year. Cleared to go this year. I think he's going to show some passion after sitting out last year. So I think he'll be a guy to watch. Newcomers coming in are going to have to contribute to build that depth. And again, much like the offensive line, the defensive line was probably the other main area of concern, and how they go through the practices and how they perform in fall camp. It's going to be something to really watch this year, I think.
Who do you think makes up this starting defensive line here in 2024?
Oh boy, I don't know. I don't think many people know at this point. I think there's going to be a lot of battles there in the fall. And again, I think if they have their way and they're happy with the group they've got, you can look at 5 starters, but the real story is going to be 10 guys, because they have got to get more guys getting significant snaps week in and week out. How it's going to land, it's hard to handicap right now, and it's really hard to handicap. You may see a starter play 30 plays and a non-starter play 60 plays. You know, it's just a question of the matchups and who's performing the best.
Moving over to the linebackers, they look like a strong group heading into 2024. Highlighting this room is the return of their leading tackler from a year ago, Jalen Schuler. What can we expect from the linebackers in 2024?
Schuler's the leader, no doubt about that. He's usually the leading tackler at a very good spring game. He was all over the field and finished last year very strong as well. They've got some veterans coming back, guys like Jamie Petway, an FAU transfer that played well for them last year. DJ Gordon is another interesting guy, a world of talent, transfer from Minnesota, but he had some ups and downs last year as well, so they're going to need some contributions from him. And again, very much like every other spot in the defense, they've got to build depth. They've got to have multiple guys getting snaps, but Schuler's going to be the guy to watch, no doubt about that.
The defensive backfield lost a couple good ones to graduation in Daquan Evans and Braxton Clark, but overall the room has some experience coming back with guys like Jalen Stokes, Logan Berryhill, and Amaris Brown. What can we expect from this unit in 2024?
I think they will be bigger, faster, and more athletic. They've really worked hard to rebuild this area. Evans is a big loss. He was a good cover guy. He was a great hitter, and he was a terrific pass rusher. He was one of the sack leaders on the team coming out of the defensive secondary. So he's going to be missed, but they've got some guys coming back that are going to help. One guy to watch in the secondary I think can really help them is Ben Knox. He's a cornerback. This will be his final season of college football. He had a great fall camp in 2023 and hurt his knee on one of the very last practices, missed the whole season. And I'm telling you, the coaches were heartbroken when that happened. They were really counting on him last year. So again, follow the pattern of all the defensive areas for South Florida. They need to have more depth, but I think they've got better size, better speed there. And that's an area they feel strongly they've got to shore up over 2023.
Who do you think replaces Daquan Evans' role here in 2024?
Maybe Ben Knox. You know, I think as a team leader and as a veteran, I think there's a certain uniqueness to Evans with the pass rushing ability in particular that is probably difficult for anyone to replicate. But right now, they just want good cover guys. They want to be able to give the linebackers and the defensive line a little more time. And when you really think about last year and you look at those defensive numbers, the conclusion was nobody gave anybody else enough time. The defensive line didn't have enough time to get to the quarterback. The linebackers didn't have enough time to get positioned to stop the run. The defensive secondary didn't have enough time to hold coverage. So you're looking at trying to bring all those units together. And I think once you see improvement at one of them, then it goes as a ripple effect and you see all three get better.
If you had to pick a defensive player to have a breakout type season in 2024, who would that be?
Well, I think Schuler is the main guy there. I think he's most likely going to be the leading tackler. I think we'll be calling his name a lot, especially at trying to stop the run. I would really hope that DJ Gordon has a big year for them out of the linebacker position, because when he is playing at his peak, he is one talented guy. Needs to find some consistency, but he can really help them this year if he's on point.
With the spring practice now over, which position group or groups do you feel is the most concerning?
I think the ones with the most to prove are probably the offensive line and the entire defensive unit. Based on what I've seen and based on the roster, the recruiting class, the people they brought in from the portal, I'm pretty optimistic about all of those areas. But they all have something to prove. They all can read the stat sheet defensively from last year. They all can look at some of the flat tires in last year's schedule that are kind of hard to figure. The loss at UAB, the loss to Florida Atlantic, and then you turn it around and you look at almost upsetting Alabama. So you got to develop some consistency and play a little better, but I think those are the areas we'll really be watching for improvement. And again, depth and just more guys with fresh legs playing at key moments.
Is there, the transfer portal is pretty much wound down a little bit, but you might get some guys trickling in here or there. Is there any particular position that, the coaches might be looking to add?
Well, I think they're always looking, but I think for the most part, they've got what they've got for the upcoming season. I'm sure they're still checking things out. The portal, as we all know, has changed college athletics dramatically, and there's a lot of new faces this year between incoming freshmen. They lost a couple of guys going elsewhere, so it'll be interesting to see, but they've done a nice job bringing in some veterans and also bringing in the quality of people that they really want to have in this program as they build it really from scratch. Guys, this is a program that was 1-11 a year ago, and Alex Golesh came in and he had no exaggeration. He had like 6 offensive linemen on the entire roster. Think about that. The whole roster, half a dozen offensive linemen. So when you talk about a total and complete rebuild, and then to get to 7-6 and beat Syracuse by 45 points in a bowl game to end the season, that's pretty good stuff. So I think they're definitely projecting upward. Now the question is, can they keep that momentum going?
And people don't know a lot about USF. They run at a pretty quick pace too. So only having 6 offensive linemen and then running at that pace is another thing.
Yeah, this is the Tennessee offense that Alex Golesh was involved in there. They do go fast. And I know that every coach in the nation is saying that. We want to go fast. We want to keep the defense on its heels. You can put that on tape. It's part of every college football interview and every program everywhere. But it's interesting, with all the new people and the first-year coaches, this offense, there was probably 4 or 5 times where I thought, man, we're really seeing it. This offense is clicking. This is what they want. And when it was devastating. My favorite moment in it, we were playing a game late in the season, and they caught the offense trying to get the right personnel on the field. South Florida snapped the ball with the defense having 17 men on the field. 17 guys, because they couldn't get guys on and off fast enough. Looked like a cartoon when it happened. So I think those signs will be more frequent this year of this offense coming together and really clicking now that they've got a little bit more of the personnel that they want. And also in their second year here at South Florida, I think that offense is going to go faster more frequently, if that makes sense.
What would you say is the main strength of this team headed into 2024?
I think it's going to be the offense and the ability to score points. I think that there's a few less unknowns on that side of the ball. They've got a special quarterback. I think the stable of running backs is solid. I think they're going to put points on the board pretty significantly. So I would probably say the offense right now would be their strongest area.
When it comes to the recruitment of new players and the retention of existing players, how has NIL and the transfer portal impacted the Bulls?
Well, it's an arms race. We all know that. It's a challenge, I'm sure, for every team in the American. South Florida has really worked on their facilities, and I think that's making a difference. They have a practice facility that opened a little over a year ago that is really impressive. And of course, the big ticket item is they are planning to open a new stadium on campus in 2027. They're actually going to do the groundbreaking homecoming weekend this October. And it'll be a 35 to 40,000 seat facility right next to the athletics building, right in the heart of the athletics district on campus. Raymond James and Tampa Stadium before that have been great homes, but it's not your home place. It's not on campus, and seats are red, not green, and there's financial aspects as well. You're not getting parking money. You're not getting concession money. It's going to be a whole new world when they open up that nice building in 2027. And I think those things are catching the attention of potential recruits as well, and that is probably helping them quite a bit.
Do you think that they're going to do you think they already have a name picked out for that stadium? Because that's kind of a thing that's now popping up here lately this week is, hey, you can get extra revenue by naming rights to a stadium and getting.
I would predict it's going to be named after the person who writes the check. Beyond that, I have no idea.
That's probably a pretty good idea.
A lot of work to be done between now and then, but there have been false starts in the past years in a South Florida stadium. This is not a false start. This is going to happen. It's going to happen on time, and they've done just a great job, the administration, of putting this together. And I think the fan base understands that as well, that this is real, and first game in 2027 is going to be pretty special.
In today's college football world, it seems that more and more the demands of a head coach are really kind of the head coach role, I guess, is really kind of transforming into more of a general manager. They have, they got to recruit freshmen, recruit the portal, work on retaining their own players from entering the portal, fundraising for the school, and maybe they're not as involved in the X's and O's. What do you kind of see there happening with Coach Golish there at South Florida?
He's an interesting guy. I've worked with every head coach in program history here, and he's unique in my mind. He's a great organizer. He has a very large staff. He seems to be unafraid to delegate, but he also has a real understanding of everything that's going on. One of my favorite routines during the season is to record the pregame interview with him day before the game, because I get about 5 minutes of tape, and then I get about 20 minutes of one-on-one with him, just to visit with him in a private setting. And it's fascinating to me, the things about this program that are going on that he knows, with all the things he's got to be concerned about and everything. He just has a great mind for detail, treats people well, is very consistent in the way he acts and the things that he does. I think recruits, players, fans, and other administrators are really warming to this guy. He's done a remarkable job, and I think the best is probably ahead for him.
So the dust has settled on the 2024 season. What do the Bulls have to do to be successful?
I think you got to fight for a conference championship. It's fascinating to look at the history of this program. You know, they had all the great early years. They were in the Big East for 8 seasons. They beat Miami. They beat Clemson. They beat Notre Dame. They beat Florida State. But they have 0 conference championships. Doesn't matter what league they've been in, Conference USA, Big East, American, they have never won a conference championship. They've won 6 bowl games, which is great. But I think that's been a goal for a while, and it continues to be a goal. And I think it's one that, if things break right this year, they feel is potentially achievable. And I think if you talk to players and coaches, they would tell you that anything less than that is probably going to be a disappointment to them this year.
So, Jim, we've covered a lot today of South Florida, but is there anything that you think we should you'd like to share, or think that we should know about this 2024 South Florida Bulls football team?
No, I would just say, if you're flipping around the dial and you catch a South Florida game on TV, or if you're flipping around the radio and get to hear our broadcast, stick with it for a little while, because I think this team's going to be a lot of fun. I think they're going to score a lot of points. I think it's going to be high-paced. And honestly, I think they're going to win a lot of games this year. So it's probably more upbeat in the offseason than it's been in quite some time. I think we felt last year at this time that progress was being made, but we were coming off a 1-11 season. So, there was very guarded optimism, I think, last year. But it's a little more so this year. So I think it'll be a team to take notice of this year. And I would just tell people, keep an eye on them. They're going to be fun.
Well, Jim, thank you again for sharing your time and knowledge of South Florida football with us today.
Oh, my pleasure. I enjoyed it, guys. Thanks for asking.
If you're watching on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you're listening in podcast form, please rate and review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Thank you all for your support. And until the next time, we are the G5 Hive.